time, like, because we were talking monitors. That's what these EQ sends, or aux sends, we would say, are for. They're for monitors, or effects routing, like if you had a reverb rack or something else like that, or like you guys have, you have a record mix, you have a hearing aid mix, and I don't know what that is, Narthex? What's Narthex?
That's this area out here.
Oh, okay, cool. So those are your auxiliary sends to those locations. So this is your record mix. These knobs end up becoming your record mix. These knobs are your hearing aid mix, and these knobs are the mix that's going out into the house. So if I want to add more of Ryan's voice in the record mix, I turn it up here.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So right now, and as would make sense, they're all kind of adjusted to that center spot, right? Because all of the levels that you guys in your minds probably are thinking that way all the levels are effectively the same, right? Which, if we've done our pre-fader level and all of these levels are, then that actually in theory is true. All of those levels are actually getting kind of semi-mixed in that feed. This will make your life a lot of fun. Your record mix, actually, if you take it out of pre-fader, it will send whatever the mix is of the faders. So you can hear what your record mix will sound like here in the room if you take those pre-fader buttons off. Because pre-fader means that before the fader hits, I'm going to send that to the record mix.
So for ease of use, we should not have those clicked.
Probably.
It depends. If you want everything to be mixed the way you're hearing it, yes, I would take those off.
Yeah.
But if you want everything to just be leveled perfectly even and without really caring what the mix is sounding like going into that record mix, do them this way. And there are different reasons you would do those for different things, right? Like that church in Columbus that had the Soundcraft that we would use, the reason we had it all leveled like that is because we would run our auxiliary mix into its own like console to record the service separately. And then there was a guy that would mix it down during the week. So that's one of the reasons you would do that, is because if I'm just recording and I'm going to mix it down later for the stream or whatever else, then on individual channels, it doesn't matter if they're all mixed or not. Nobody's hearing that in real time. You know what I mean? They're all going to hear it in post after I've mixed it. In your guys' case, taking it out of that mode means that if I turn the pastor up because I can't hear him, he's also going to get turned up in that record mix, which is nice because chances are if you can't hear him here, you're probably going to have a similar issue in the record mix.
Right.
We send things out to YouTube, so
Yeah.
Right. And so that's just a note. So just keep that in mind. I'll let you guys make that decision. But that's all that auxiliary sends do effectively. And then that actually is what informs us about this section of our board, is that all of these are basically the master knobs for these buses. So if I have all of these together, this is how I control them all at once.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it's the same thing as this part of the board, except instead of adding a bunch of faders so that there was 3 levels of faders, they just made them knobs.
So if things in YouTube land are too loud, then we could use whichever one.
Whichever
one there. To turn it, but
So
it
like
sounds good
your
here.
record mix here is on aux 4, it looks like. So I could come up here to go to aux 4 and turn it down, and that would turn down all of aux 4.
Awesome.
Correct. Yep. You're not doing any 2-track stuff right now. So let me think. Yeah, and then so if you decided to add monitors eventually, which we can talk about, it's actually a pretty easy thing to do with your guys' setup. I think it should in theory be easy to do. We would just do that on auxiliary 1 and 2, and or however many monitors you wanted. You could technically do up to 6, right? 6 separate ones, or 3 separate, because you're using these 3 for other things. But the same thing is true here. Like if you're having trouble hearing the pastor out in the lobby, it's this knob, and that's just the mix. And then all of these can either be well, I mean, I'll leave them where they are right now because they probably got there on purpose from somebody else doing stuff. But that ends up being what you're looking at.
Okay.
And that's your mixer. Oh, I guess the other thing here would be kind of the last thing is panning. Because you already kind of, well, I guess we'll talk about these last things and then I'll be done. I won't quit early on it. But so panning is panning in this environment, and typically in live sound environments, we don't do a lot of it. The reason being is that, well, so in stereo mixing, stereo is like the left-right mixing. So that would be what you would think logically would be happening in this room because there's a left speaker and a right speaker, correct? But usually in live sound, if we do panning, what ends up happening is if I pan, let's say I pan Ryan to the right side of the room and Sandy to the left side of the room. This side of the room is going to hear a lot of Sandy, and this side of the room is going to hear a lot of Ryan. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so usually you're not really looking to pan in a live setting that much because what you really want to create is what we call a point source, right? It's where it sounds like all the sound is coming from the center of the room. Yeah. And that way, instead of thinking about a mix widely, so like a guitar player here, piano player, drummer, vocal 1 and 2, all across the thing, we're trying to stack those people vertically like this, so that everything is coming from the middle. So, and then when we talk about mixing, then it's kick and bass, a little bit of piano bottom, piano mid, vocal mid, piano top, vocal top. You see what I'm saying? And then you're thinking top down this way. So it's like if we took our 20 hertz chart like this and flipped it like this. Yeah. That's mono mixing. And that is what we're doing in this space. So you don't really need the pan knob. Environments where I would use the pan knob, if I have two guitar players and I have let's say I have two, and this is specific, let's say I have two rhythm guitar players, which happens in churches sometimes because you'll get volunteers that want to do the same weekend, right? Or we had a father-son that would play guitar together, and the son was learning and the father was obviously like a little bit better. So we would have them play at the same space, and I would actually pan them left to right because dad was teaching son pretty much the same parts. And so I could put them on either side. And the reason I did that is it actually makes it really wide and pretty. And it makes it so that those guitars aren't muddying up the vocal mix and the piano mix and all that stuff in the middle. So it gives me more space, and I know that basically those instruments sound the same. So the people on the left side of the room aren't going to not be able to hear the guitar because there's a guitar in that speaker and playing pretty much the same thing as this speaker, right? Yeah. So that's a situation where I would do that. Potentially, if I wanted to, right now it looks like the piano is coming in mono, it's just got one channel. I might, in a room like this, do the grand piano wide. So I would mic the bottom end and I'd mic the top end, kind of like, if I split the piano in thirds, I'd put a mic over each part of the piano and I'd run it into like 5 and 6, and I'd put 5 over here and 6 over here. And then when they played the piano, it would sound like low to high and high to low.
That's cool.
And what's nice about that is that it's also not in the middle. So now when I went, bass and kick, piano low, vocal low, the piano is out of that equation. So now it's bass and kick, vocals, piano. So the mix is a lot cleaner and a lot clearer, and stuff's not fighting each other in that middle anymore. Does that make sense?
I try to eat a sandwich this tall.
Correct.
This tall.
Right. It's like yeah, that's exactly it. And it's funny because that's truly the reason that we started doing stereo sound was for mixing, because what it does is it creates what we call an invisible stage in front of you of sound, where just like on a normal stage where stuff is coming at you from various locations on a stage in real life, stereo creates that effect in your brain, where if I hear a piano from this side, my brain puts it in that space. So it's almost like creating invisible stage in front of you. So in a studio environment, or like if I'm mixing for a CD or a car or something else like that, right, or headphones, I'm gonna do stuff in stereo because I'm trying to create the illusion of a live performance. In a live performance, we already have the point sources in front of us. I can hear the acoustic piano in this room without a speaker. So all the speaker's doing is enhancing it, and the best way to enhance it is to take it from the center, right? Because then everybody hears that enhancement evenly throughout the room,
Yeah.
Cool?
Ooh, all right.
Yeah, man,
That's
all
cool.
this. And that's my favorite my favorite thing to teach my students about, because then I make them go listen to stuff, because old records especially, a lot of them were mixed mono, so you can listen to like old Beatles records and stuff, and or old Beach Boys records are my favorite. Like Pet Sounds is a mono record, and that has all sorts of instrumentation on it, but it all comes from the same place. And then you go listen to like, you know, a modern pop record, and the whole sound is like this instead of like this. It's just weird. And then I always talk about the tricks, you know, like, you know, you'll listen to a guitar, and the guitar will play in this ear, or this speaker, and then it goes over to this speaker, and then they play together, and it's really big sounding, and they're like, "This is so cool!" And I'm like, "I told you, it's stereo mixing." It's like, and that's why it's lasted for as long as it's lasted. Is it sounds like what we see, right? Versus even like surround or these other things that are technically better sound, we still don't prefer them necessarily for music. It's weird. So anyway, we have that panning thing done. So then the last thing are these.
Where's that again?
That's the yellow knob, kind of that
Yellow
last
pan,
knob.
okay.
You guys obviously are familiar with mutes. That was one of the things you mentioned. Like I know how to mute and unmute stuff, so that's good. So the last thing are the group buttons. You already know the fader thing, right? Like, so once all of this is set, it's just a matter of changing the levels. So if the piano's too loud, bring it down a little bit. If I can't hear Ryan, just bring him up a little bit, right? Those things. And what you end up with usually is like, you know, very subtle stuff like this.
Yeah.
When I come to a mixer and that's what I see, usually for me that means somebody has been doing this a while when I see it. Because it's not, you know, when you see stuff like this, that just means that there's some kind of signal issue going on up here, because this guy clearly isn't trimmed loud enough because it has to be cranked, and then these ones are probably trimmed too loud, right? Whereas this is just mixing. You know, like that's just blending sounds together. And then I'll give a last minute rant about mixing here in a second too. But so the last button set we have here are these group buttons. So what's nice about these is, and Ryan has already experienced some of this when we were doing that record mix. When you hit the C and take like when you hit that C button, that sends all of the stuff from here. So anything that the C button is pushed down on, in this case it looks like everything, is now going to go to this center mono mix, which is what you're doing your live stream feed off of right now. So that is post fader. So that means that whatever that mix is here is getting sent to here. Does that make sense? So that's nice. It creates the same thing here of this knob when we do take the pre-fader button off. Mix is just mix, so that's left and right. That's the speakers in the room, right? Nothing fancy there. But if I hit these buttons off, they go out of that. So if that button is off, I won't hear it in the piano and the speakers, right?
Yeah.
So that's another thing. Even if it's unmuted, you know, if it's unmuted and that mix button is off, I still won't hear it in the speakers because it's not running there. And then groups. Group like 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like these are going to just do stereo groupings. So this would be the best example I can make for groups would be if I had a drum set